Great. The next person we're going to hear from is Jamie Alley. I think I described him as representing the province. I don't think that's fair. It's not fair. And he'll be quick to point out he's not the Premier, but you probably know that anyhow. He is the Director of Oceans and Marine Fisheries Division in the BC Ministry of Environment. He's here to bring a provincial perspective, and I think he's another one of these 30-year guys, right? You get to watch? So, Jamie Alley.
Thank you very much, Gord. Yes, I do indeed actually have 32 years, but I think I've probably known Gord for about 40 based on our work together with a youth group many, many years ago. And if anybody wants to hear some Gord Sloan stories, I can tell you about the time when he took a piano off the front of a landing barge in Jarvis Inlet. We're very happy to be here today. I think this is really a who's who in British Columbia, people who care about our oceans and coastal areas. I'm also really pleased with the way that we have developed this tradition in many of our meetings now, where we get reminded of the importance and value of our oceans and coasts and resources by our First Nations people. I traveled in New Zealand many years ago and impressed very much by the way that Maori culture was integrated into the activities that happen down there. Anybody that's been to a rugby match down in that country and seen the haka dance that they use to scare the hell out of the opposition, I kind of think maybe what we need to do is get a lot of Coast Salish people out and do a warrior dance right before a Canucks game and just see if we can scare the opposition that come into GM Place. I'm thinking of changing my title from director to co-chair. I have the opportunity with my colleague Wayne Moore to co-chair on behalf of the provinces and territories the National Oceans Task Group. That's a mechanism that we use with the provinces and territories to engage with the federal government, and we've had many discussions on how the framework for coastal and marine planning needs to look like right across the country, and I think the co-chair role that I do have helps me to bring that British Columbia perspective to that. I'm also co-chair of the Canada-BC Oceans Coordinating Committee. This is a committee that meets quite regularly every 4 to 6 weeks and includes the key federal and provincial agencies. We've been in operation for about 4 years now, and it's an opportunity for us to set aside our jurisdiction. I remember going back right into grad school that one of the issues that always comes up in terms of coastal and oceans planning is the fractured nature of the jurisdiction. And at that Canada-BC Oceans Coordinating Committee, to the extent possible, we try and set aside the jurisdictional issues and try and work towards a common vision and doing the right thing. I'm also co-chair of the BC Washington Coastal and Oceans Task Force that was recently set up, where we're undertaking a number of very exciting conservation actions and programs with our colleagues in the transboundary waters. And I was also recently asked to be the co-chair of the West Coast Vancouver Island Aquatic Management Board, and declined that one because I think it's important in that mechanism that we maintain our tradition of having our co-chairs come from local government now and First Nations governments. Anyway, British Columbia has a very long and tradition in coastal planning, starting with the Souk Foreshore Plan, Souk Harbour and Basin Foreshore Plan in 1979, when a very ill-equipped and badly trained young geographer that had recently graduated from UVic was sent out to meet in the living rooms of the East Souk Ratepayers Association, and that was my first introduction to how much British Columbians are passionate and care about their oceans and coastline. That was followed with plans in Ladysmith Harbour and Malaspine Inlet, and more recently 8 coastal management area plans at the 1 to 20,000 level in a number of areas on the west and north coast of Vancouver Island and in the Discovery Passage, Johnson Strait area. So we're very pleased to see the interest in integrated oceans planning that's taking place within the PNCIMA area. British Columbia really welcomes the partnership that the Government of Canada has developed with First Nations to bring forward this activity. It's very consistent with the provincial government's new relationship with First Nations people and a number of the things that the government has recently done. Most of the area in this planning area covers waters belonging to British Columbia, subject to First Nations rights and title, and we clearly have a number of significant jurisdictional interests within the area. As mentioned earlier by Art and others, we spent probably the last decade developing the Central and North Coast LRMPs, the Land Resource Management Plans, and much more recently the new Haida Gwaii Land Use Plan. So in effect, I think we're very fortunate that there's now some clear direction on the government's intent for the management of the upland areas adjacent to the PNCIMA area, and that includes, as Art noted, the Great Bear Rainforest and some of the most advanced conservation initiatives probably anywhere in North America. We have indicated to our federal government colleagues that we are going to be very happy to do a very large paper dump on them. So one day, folks, when the semi-trailer backs up, we will be providing to the planning process all of the documentation and information that was developed for those 3 land use plans. My colleagues in ILMB, as I noted earlier, they're the Integrated Land Management Bureau, have a very significant kind of experience in marine planning. As I mentioned earlier, they've completed a number of plans at the coastal management area level, and we will be pleased to provide our experience both in the LRMP planning scale and in that coastal management planning scale to the planning teams to further support the efforts at the scale being contemplated for the PNCIMA area. We are also going to be making available to the process all of the provincial resource information and data that exists in the provincial data warehouse through Geodata BC. I'm really happy to let people know in this room that next week, finally, our Marine Protected Area database will come live on GeoBC. It's linked to CRIMS, the Coastal Resource Information System. So people will be able to go into that data warehouse publicly and query all of that information. I should also thank my colleagues from the federal government, from DFO, Paul and Wayne, and Environment Canada, Paul Kluckner and his staff, and Parks Canada, who have put forward significant financial contributions to assist us in making that database publicly available. We are also working right now to develop more specific provincial coastal and ocean strategies, and those will form the basis and help shape our involvement in the PNCIMA process in the future, and we expect to have some more clarity on that score within the very near future. So as requested, the province will provide any clarifications of provincial policy to the management of provincial resources that may be required throughout the process. We really regret that funding constraints and priorities in other parts of the coast don't allow us to take a formal role on the steering committee at this time, but we will be looking at our resources and are willing to revisit that question within the future. So we will continue to work away as we've done in the past at that 1 to 20,000 coastal management area scale, engaging people who are also involved in the PNCIMA process with that. And I should also note that, we do have other priorities on other parts of the coast. We're working quite actively with the West Coast Vancouver Island Aquatic Management Board. Many of the other members of the board are here today, and we were recently very fortunate to have the Moore Foundation come forward with a very significant grant to help us move forward with coastal marine planning in that. And I see my friend Megan Calcary here. Thank you, Megan, for that significant contribution. And as I noted earlier, we're also working very closely with our colleagues in the state of Washington on the transboundary areas, and with Parks Canada on the Southern Strait of Georgia National Marine Conservation Area proposal, and some of the work that DFO and Paul's people are working on through the Georgia Basin overview. So we have to spread a very limited supply of resources very thinly right across the whole coast.